Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Starry Skies, the magazine programme that tells you all about what you can see in the night sky this month. I'm Mark Hardacre.
And I'm Steve Tonkin.
And today we're going to be looking at the stars and planets and other celestial delights for the month of November.
And there are a lot.
Yeah, there are indeed. It's quite a full show this month, isn't it, Steve?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you see the comet? Did you manage to see the comet during October?
Yes, I did. I mean, not when it was at its best, because there was a lump of cloud just over it. But I believe you saw it that night.
I did see it. I saw it the first night you could. It wasn't very bright, and we really have had rotten weather, haven't we? It's been continuing with this storm Ashley and the constant rain and cloud we've had. But I did manage to see the comet, and I did photograph it with my Sea-Star Smart Scope.
I took a photograph or two of it with my DSLR camera, my cheap second-hand.
But as we predicted, we said last month, didn't we, that the comet was going to be a nice one, but not a great one.
It's nice because it's nice to see a comet. They just look special.
Yeah, they are. Apparently, a great comet is one that can be found by anyone, whereas a nice comet is one that needs pointing out to the man in the street. Oh, look, there it is. There's your binoculars, and have a look. And that was the same with this comet. You couldn't really see it unless you knew where to look.
Yeah, I mean, we had guests round one evening when it was nice and clear, and I had to sort of
point it out.
Tell them exactly how to get to it. Star hopping up from a shrub in the garden.
Yeah, but it will be back in another 80,000 years. It is still visible in the evening sky, even in the first week of November, which is where we are now. But it's fading quickly as it moves away from the Earth, and you'll definitely need binoculars or a small telescope to find it now. But it's still there with its little tail in the constellation of Ophiuchus or Aquila, depending when during the month of November you look. Yes! So, what about the full moon? That's
15th. So that's when people like me tend to sleep at night.
Whereas us astronomers go out at the early part of the month when it's new moon, or at the end of the month. So for the month of November, forget the middle. It's the beginning and the end of the month where you've got dark skies. And it's also a good month for the planets, because we'll have Saturn and Jupiter and Mars all visible with the naked eye this month. And Uranus, although not visible with the naked eye, is definitely, you can see it.
It's easy in binoculars.
Yeah, it certainly is. And what about constellation of the month this month?
Well, I think we decided on Cassiopeia, the queen.
Indeed. And
of constellations.
It's one of our personal favourites. Both of us, we both think Cassiopeia is a wonderful constellation, and we could wax lyrical about it for hours, but Steve, the station manager, would kick us off air, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah.
So where shall we start? Let's have a look. As usual in the north part of the sky, shall we?
It's the best place to start because everybody can recognise it, and you've got the plough nice and low now on the horizon. So you can, if you've got a low northern horizon, you can see that, and that points up to the pole star, and then above that, you've got the You've got Cassiopeia, which we'll be looking at later.
Yeah. And, of course, now the clocks have gone back, which is a good thing. In some ways a good thing. For us astronomers, it's nice. But now sunset is at the ridiculously early time of 4:35 during this month, which means it's fully dark by around 6 p.m. Yeah. So goodbye summer.
Yeah, but hello dark skies, we hope.
Indeed. So we get actually about 12 hours of starry skies, and even us hardy astronomers like Steve and I, that's too much for us. We couldn't do a whole 12-hour night, could we?
No. It's 3 or 4 hours is really pushing it, I find now. For most people, an hour or two is easily enough.
Yeah, dear readers, I will point out that Steve is a lot older than I am. Anyway, enough of this banter. So there we were looking north, and there's the plough low in the northern sky. It's actually dipped down to the horizon, and it's making its way back up again as November proceeds. And as we've said before on this programme many a time, the plough is an excellent pointer to other constellations in the sky.
Indeed.
So let's take the fourth and the second stars in the plough, counting from the right, and draw a line through them to your right, more or less along the horizon, and you'll find the heavenly twins, the constellation of Gemini. So we're going to put, you'll see on our star chart on the Forest FM website and elsewhere, you'll see Gemini just rising in the east around this time, around 9 or 10 o'clock on a November evening.
Yeah, that's nice. So the two twins are Castor and Pollux, and I can never remember which one is which. But it doesn't really matter. You see them, they're there together. And if you look very carefully, you'll see they're actually part of a rectangle of stars, that's a long rectangle that goes down to the right from them. And
that's the two brothers, Castor and Pollux, with their arms round each other, rising in the east. And just below them, so if you follow the line of Castor and Pollux down towards the horizon there, not brilliant yet, but certainly brighter than it has been, is the planet Mars. So if you've never seen Mars before, go and have a look on a November night. You'll see it rising, probably around about 10 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, and the thing to do, if you've got them, just look at it with any sort of binoculars, because it'll bring the colour out more.
Yes. Definitely. Mars, with the naked eye, is clearly a different colour. It's clearly orangey red. But like you say, Steve, with binoculars, it really is.
Mm. And if you defocus them slightly, it even brings the colour out even more.
So there we go. So we went from the Plough, we went to the twin stars of Castor and Pollux. Now continue in the same direction, and you'll come to the brilliant star of Betelgeuse, which is the bright star in the upper left shoulder of Orion, which is now just starting to poke above the horizon around 10 o'clock on a mid-November evening. And you know that winter is just around the corner when you can see Orion in the evening sky.
Yeah, indeed. So Betelgeuse, which Mark just mentioned, is a really nice reddish star again. It's not as red as Mars, but it's distinctly orangey red. It's a star called a red giant. And if it was where our sun was, we'd be inside it. Actually, so would Mars, and Jupiter would nearly be inside it as well. It's a huge thing, hence giant. Clues in the name. Then you go diagonally down, and you've got the other really bright star in Orion, which is Rigel, rhymes with Nigel, which is a bluish colour. So if you ever thought all stars were the same colour, they're really not, and those two really bring it out. The thing about stars at this time of year, when it's starting to get chilly, is when they're low to the horizon, they really twinkle. And sometimes you might not even be able to see what colour they are, because they tend to flash different colours.
Especially Rigel and Sirius later in the year.
And Capella as well.
But when they're low to the horizon, you see green, blue, white, green, red, yellow, all the colours as the light passes through the atmosphere like a prism and produces all these twinkling colours.
A little thing you can do with a phone camera or another camera is move the camera quite fast as you're taking a photograph, and you'll see the star, the streak of the star, showing different colours. It only works when it's really low down and really twinkling a lot.
Yeah. And also when the weather isn't great, when you've got a perfectly still night, the stars don't twinkle as much, do they?
Which is great, because then you can start seeing detail in things.
Exactly.
Particularly the planets.
Anyway, so we're at Betelgeuse in Orion. Now direct your eyes directly above Betelgeuse, and of course you can't miss Jupiter, because it's absolutely the brightest thing in the sky, other than the sun and moon, this week.
Mm-hmm.
And the king of the solar system. If you turn any optical aid on there, you'll see the moons and the belts. Now let's turn to the south. So face away from the Plough. Now you're looking into the southern hemisphere, or the southern part of the sky, which has been filled in the summer with the delightful constellations of the summer and the Milky Way.
Milky Way, yeah.
Yep. And now, of course, during autumn and winter, it's fairly barren.
It is, but it is the time of year for star clusters. Sparkling star clusters. You just see them everywhere. So when you're looking for Uranus and above that, you'll see obvious things like the Pleiades, which I think most people mention. It can look like a tiny little plough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's rising in the east, not far from Jupiter. You find it quite easily with binoculars and with the naked eye, of course. There it is. So there we are, looking in the south. We've got very little there in terms of bright stars. There's one little ray of brightness which comes from Saturn, which is past its best, but still prominent in the southwest. You can get your telescope out and have a look at the rings.
Yeah, it definitely needs telescope. Binoculars are not your instrument of choice for planets like that.
Cannot see the rings at all with binoculars. And all these constellations can be seen on our monthly sky charts, which we're now publishing every month after this show on the Forest FM website, together with also online at the Fordingbridge Astronomers and the Wessex Astronomical Society website. So we'll publish on there, as we usually do, our constellation of the month, their monthly sky chart, and a few other little things this month we'll come to in a moment. So, back north, back to the Plough, back to Polaris, and overhead you'll find constellation of Cassiopeia, and that is our constellation of this month.
Indeed.
And it's a group or asterism, as we call it, of 5 stars in the shape of an M. So what the heck, Steve, is an asterism?
An asterism is just a group of stars that forms a recognisable pattern.
So it's not a constellation?
It's not a constellation, it's part of a constellation. So at the moment, Cassiopeia looks like a rather stretched out sideways letter M. It can also look like a letter W. 6 months' time it'll do that. And it's usually called the W. So that's your first asterism we're going to look at this month.
And there's several of them in Cassiopeia.
There's loads of them in Cassiopeia. And the easy way to find them, well, we'll put the chart on the Forest FM page and the Astronomy Society pages, as Mark said. But you've got your M in the sky and you number the stars from left to right. There's only 5 stars at each point of the M. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we can use those to find a load more little asterisms, which could be quite fun. So if you go from 2 to 1, and then carry on the same distance again, and we'll need binoculars for this one, you'll see a little group of stars that looks just like an aeroplane, flying upside down at the moment. And it's sometimes called the Queen's Flight or the Queen's Aeroplane.
Queen Cassiopeia.
Queen Cassiopeia, indeed.
All right,
yeah.
that's
so
it.
that's there. And that's the bright stars are the wingtip navigation lights. And they're exactly wrong, because the redder one is actually on the starboard wing rather than the port. But hey, who cares? Right. Now, the next thing you do is you go to star 3 and you put it at the top, maybe 11 o'clock-ish, if you think of a clock face of your field of view, and you'll see like a double curve of stars. It looks a bit like a roller coaster, again, upside down at this time of year, and it's called Eddie's Coaster. Eddie's, and this is odd, this thing, because you don't see it on star charts, you don't see it just about anywhere except through usually 50mm binoculars. 10 by 50s, it becomes incredibly obvious. And it's named for this chap, Eddie Carpenter. Unfortunately no longer with us. He was Cotswold Astronomical Society, and he used to delight in showing this to people, and it's now been recognised and given his name. And there's a hint there. There's bound to be other patterns in the sky that look like something which people haven't noticed yet. So you don't have to be called Messier or Moore or anyone like that to get your name in a catalogue. You can have your own object, name it after you if you find something that's there. So great, because there is loads. Right, star 4. And they put that at about 8 o'clock in the field of view. And there's a little hexagon of stars, like a hexagonal kite, with a tail coming off it.
And this is a really obvious one. This is one that you can find almost with naked eye, but with any old binoculars you can find this little kite.
Yeah, and it's called the Queen's Kite, again, because of Cassiopeia.
Now we come to my favourite, though.
Right, so we've got halfway between 4 and 5, and then look off to the right, and there's a bright star off to the right. It's called Miram, and halfway between that line between 4 and 5 and Miram, you'll definitely need binoculars for this. There's looks like a little stick man with his pulling his muscles, as it were, sort of arms flexed and that. So it's the Muscleman cluster. Obviously not a very intelligent bloke, because he hasn't got a head. But so it looks just like this little little stick man. If you want to know its proper name, it's Stock 2, but it is actually one of the open clusters. But it's lovely. Right, carry on. We've got 2 more to go. And they're both named after a Canadian astronomer, and he found these with 35mm binoculars, so you can find it easy. His name was Lucien Kemble. So you go from star 4 to star 5. Same distance further on, you see another bright whitish star, that's Iota. Same bit again, and you come to a little reddish star. Again, binoculars, and you'll see this looks like a diamond kite with a tail going upwards at the moment. So that's Kemble's Kite. And then the most difficult one to do, because it's quite a long distance, is you take the from 1 to 5. I do it by pushing out my forefinger and little finger and getting them on it, and then you just go off to the right, same amount again with binoculars, and there's a little line of stars there. It looks beautiful. It's actually horizontal at the moment. So this little line of stars with a bright one in the middle. Our friend Bob Misen introduced me to that decades ago, and he called it the wristwatch. But it's generally known as Kemble's Cascade, because you can imagine when it's vertical in the sky, it looks just like a ribbon waterfall. And if you're very lucky, you'll see there's a little splash pool at the end of it as well. It's gorgeous. And these are asterisms. They're some of my favourite things in the sky, and they're great to show people. If you're showing other people around the night sky, to have little things, oh yes, that looks like so-and-so, that looks like so-and-so, it helps them make a relationship with it.
It really does. And asterisms, as Steve says, they're not really visible or not in any star atlas. They're very informal. And all these are part of the constellation of Cassiopeia.
Yeah.
But especially Kemble's Cascade. Steve showed me that when I first came back to the UK 5-6 years ago. I'd never seen Kemble's Cascade before. And it's absolutely delightful. And we can all see it. Pair of binoculars, find it in the sky. It is delightful. And it looks just like the waterfall in Switzerland in Interlaken when I was down there. Right. Just like that, yeah.
Great.
Anyway, sorry, we just got distracted there a bit, didn't we? Never mind. Anyway, back to Cassiopeia. But for the best reason, Steve. So back to Cassiopeia. So it was one of the 48 original constellations listed by Ptolemy. And, of course, it's part of a well-known Greek legend.
So who was Ptolemy?
Ptolemy, he was a Greek astronomer. I think he was in Alexandria, and I think he was there around the 2nd century AD. Is that right? I think that's correct, yeah. But the Greek legend around Cassiopeia was that she was the vain queen of Ethiopia who boasted she was more beautiful than any of the gods. They didn't like that much, so they sent a sea monster to ravage the land, and disaster was only averted by her sacrificing her daughter Andromeda to the sea monster. But the grisly end of the tale was averted by the prompt intervention of Perseus. He was on his way back from killing the Gorgon and had conveniently had the Gorgon's head in his hand, showed it to the monster, turned it to stone, released Andromeda and married her. And the gods, fed up with all this stuff, put the entire cast in the sky. So we can see all these constellations in the sky. Cassiopeia is almost overhead during these November nights, and it is a delight for binoculars. It really is.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Just sweep through it. The Milky Way flows right through the constellation, and you can just I've written here, it says, let your eyes bathe in the starry milkiness. What's that?
It's gorgeous. It's so nice.
I'm getting too romantic here.
No,
Steve.
but it's, we talk about this time of year being the sparkling star clusters time, and there's so many around there. Yeah. Just cast around there with binoculars. The problem isn't finding star cluster. The problem is identifying the ones you do find. There's so many of them.
Yeah, and there are really a couple that are my favourites. With a bigger telescope, some of these are just wonderful. One of my favourites is NGC 663. NGC means New General Catalogue, and it was a catalogue of fuzzy objects discovered mainly by William Herschel in the 1780s and 90s. And 663 is an open cluster of about 400 stars visible in binoculars and small telescopes. It's on the map, so we have a map of Cassiopeia on the websites. Have a look on there. That little yellow speckle of stars with the 663 next to it, that is where the cluster is, and it's lovely. It's actually part of a trio, right?
It is, yeah. The other two are not quite as easy. There's one which is NGC 654, which is right next to it. If you've got in binoculars or a small telescope that's not magnifying too much, easily in the same field of view. 654 is bigger, but it's not as bright. And then just a little bit along from there is 659, NGC 659, and that's quite difficult because it's both smaller and fainter than the others.
Yeah. As we were saying, Cassiopeia is peppered with these clusters, and you really can't go wrong. In the darkest of dark skies, really dark skies, I think that 663 is visible to the naked eye. I think I've been able to see it from a really dark sky. But in a telescope or binoculars, you really can't beat it. It's absolutely fantastic.
Indeed.
So, what about another favourite?
Oh, NGC 457.
Also marked on the map, right?
Also marked on the map, the Owl Cluster, or the ET Cluster, sometimes it's called, because it's got two bright eyes. And so imagine it as an owl. It's got his wings out to the side, and it's really easy to identify once you've got binoculars or telescope on it. But the other thing about it is the brightest eye, which is known formally as Fire Cassiopeia, is actually not part of the cluster. It's only halfway to it. It's about 4,000 light years away, which means you're seeing it around about the time the pyramids were just finished being built. But the rest of the cluster's 8,000.
And they just happen to be one in front of the other, right?
Yes, so it's easy to imagine when you look at the night sky that, you're looking at something that's two-dimensional. And actually it's not. There's an enormous amount of depth there. So one of the reasons the bright eye is brighter is because it's closer.
Yep. Okay, so that's Cassiopeia. Again, do have a look for it. It's a lovely constellation. It never sets from the UK. It's always visible in the sky somewhere, like the Plough. And right now, more or less overhead towards the middle of the month and the middle of the night. So do have a look for it, and our little map on the websites will help you find it. So now let's move on to the planets this month and see how we can find them. So, as we mentioned earlier, you can't miss brilliant Jupiter.
You can't,
In
no.
the constellation of Taurus, distinctive yellow colour, and it's really marvellous in your telescope.
Yeah, it is. And telescope will easily show you what are called the equatorial belts, these brown bands that go across it. You might, if you're looking at the right time, see the not so great anymore, not so red anymore spot, otherwise still known as a great red spot, though. And it's just delightful, and you can also see 4 of its moons.
Yeah, and it's probably the astronomer's favourite planet because if you get a bigger scope and look at the planet, it rotates once every 9 hours, which means the surface, as you watch the surface of Jupiter, from in the space of 10 or 15 minutes, you can see movement as it rotates. So it's really one of our favourites. We also have talked briefly about Mars rising in Gemini in the east. And it's getting closer and closer to us as we catch it up in its orbit. So Mars is one orbit outside of the Earth, as you recall. So we are slowly catching it up and getting nearer and nearer to it. And it's going to be at its nearest in January. So then it will be as bright or even brighter than Jupiter, I think. But right now it's bright, but not quite so great.
No, but if you've got a telescope, do look at it, because you might, on a very still night, just be able to pick out some markings on it.
Yeah.
But but if you watch it, say every week or so, you'll see that it appears to get bigger and brighter as we get closer to January. Really worth doing.
And we'll talk about it again in January because we're going to test you, see if you can find the polar caps.
Yes.
Which we'll come to that in January.
Indeed.
So still time to view Saturn, which is now to the southwest in the evening. You can't really miss it because it's in the middle of a part of the sky with nothing else there. And if you had your telescope in the loft, as we said last month, go and get it out now, set it up, and if nothing else, if you can't make it work, you don't know how to find anything in the sky, find Saturn, point it at Saturn, try your best, because it's worth it. You will get a wow moment when you see that planet with its rings. It is delightful.
And if you really can't set it up and find anything with it, please do contact your local astronomical society, because somebody will help you do it.
Yeah, that's our job. Falling Bridge astronomers, Wessex Astronomical Society, of which Steve and I are both members, as well as Cranbourne Chase Astronomy Club. All those clubs local to here were very, very keen to help you out. We don't often talk about the dim outer planets, do we? But Uranus is easily seen in binoculars this month.
Yes, it's nice. You get a bit of colour with it in binoculars as well. I mean, not enormously bluey green, not like you see on the Voyager images or anything like that. But you can pick up a bit of colour. It's near to the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. And if you look at it every week or so, you'll see it moving ever so slowly through the sky. That's how we know it's a planet, not a star.
Yep. And remember, it wasn't even discovered until 1781, again by William Herschel. But most people have never actually seen it. It's just about visible with the naked eye if you know exactly where to look on a super clear night. Yep. But generally you need binoculars, and generally people don't know where to look. So we're going to stick a map of where to find Uranus also on the website and see if you can find it. It will be at its best during this month of November, when it's opposite the sun in the sky, at opposition. And as Steve says, it's pale blue, green star, and it moves a whisker every day.
Yeah.
So that's it for the planets. No Jupiter, no Venus or Mercury.
No,
particularly.
they're too close to the sun.
Too close to the sun. So we'll have to wait for a few months before we can see them. So again, if you're interested in finding more about astronomy, please do contact your local astronomy club. We are always looking for new members. We're growing and growing. The interest in astronomy is great at the moment, and we'd love to meet you. Fordingbridge Astronomers, we meet every third Wednesday in the month at the Elm Tree in Hightown in Ringwood. When's the third Wednesday of November then? We should really know that, shouldn't we? Is it the 16th?
We should really know that.
Why don't we tell you? Well, yeah, we should tell you. Anyway, we will next month. It's the third Wednesday of November.
Right, and then the Wessex Astronomical Society meets at the Allendale Centre in Wimborne on the first Tuesday of every month.
And finally, the Cranbourne Chase Astronomy Club up in Shaftesbury, so just outside of the Forest FM listening zone. But they meet on the second Wednesday of the month at the Grosvenor Hotel in the middle of Shaftesbury. And all three clubs, very helpful, get you started, do observing sessions, and very friendly and welcoming. So that's it. And of course, one other important thing, you don't need expensive kit.
No, you don't.
In fact, binoculars are the best to start with.
Yeah, because everything you see is the right way up, and you're used to using binoculars. All I would suggest, look, if you're using binoculars, don't try and cast around the sky with your binoculars unless you're just having fun. But if you're trying to see something, look at it with your naked eye, and then just put the binoculars in the way.
Yes.
Yeah, then you've got a chance of seeing it. And if you can't see it, you're probably too low, so go upwards a bit.
And you can always buy Steve's Binocular Sky book, which should help you out better, right?
Oh, yes, you could. Yeah, I've got two, actually. But yeah.
All on Amazon. Have a look. Just a quick plug for him there. Anyway, thanks for listening today. Good listeners. We'll see you next month. Thank you very much for listening. And it's goodbye from me, Mark Hardacre.
And from me, Steve Tonkin. But much more important, clear skies.